In 2020, video games have become more profitable than the movie industry and North American sports combined. Holy. While the majority of revenue comes from studios with hundreds of employees and millions of dollars at their disposal, or simply questionable monetary practices, it takes years for projects like these to come to fruition, especially in a climate that makes mass collaboration more difficult. So, what happens between this and this? Sometimes you can release an old game and generally do it in a much shorter period of time. But with big games taking longer to make and not appealing to the entire market, who fills in the gaps? Who pushes the medium forward? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? So the big three are all in a tough spot right now, having to delay many of their biggest games on their brand new systems, which are hard enough to get themselves. New console generation lineups are always pretty sad, aside from a few instances. Big games just take time, especially with new hardware. In comes the indie game. Small team, small budget, small impact, right? How is a dinky little game like Minecraft going to compete with Crysis 2?
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
But you know what Minecraft is, right? Right? Like, what are you even doing if you don't know what
Interactive gaming. Look, I'm just saying this.
The Game Awards have quickly become the biggest game award show in the industry. Think the Oscars, but for people who don't really do outside very well.
The Oscars, you know?
In 2020, an indie game was nominated for Game of the Year. Another went home with the most awards of the night. The Game of the Year winner was in development for 6 years by over 2,000 people, with an estimated budget of over $100 million. 60% of the players who purchased the game finished it, which is nearly the best the PS4 really has. The Witcher 3, a game widely considered to be one of the best games of the last generation, had a 26% completion rate. One of my favorite games of all time is A Short Hike. You can finish the game in about an hour. So, are games too long? Okay, so the majority of gamers are ages 18 to 34. These are people who grew up with video games always being around, and as such are prone to be more receptive to this new technology. But, and I don't know if you know this, and I guess I really don't, but adulthood is busy? Like, it costs a lot of money to not die. So pouring 50 to 100 hours into a game while working over 40 hours, having real life stuff to do, having other hobbies like music and cooking and, raising children, it can become a daunting task. It's a lot less of a commitment to put down $20 on a 5-hour game than $60 on an 80-hour game that you might not even like. I couldn't finish Assassin's Creed Valhalla because there was about 30 hours of doing the exact same thing. But inside, I finished it in 2 sittings, and it was amazing. That's not to say that indie games have to be short. Hades is 20 hours, Hollow Knight can take 40, Stardew Valley doesn't end. There's a lot of value to be had in these games. Have you noticed how every new open world game advertises just how big the world is? Like how each Assassin's Creed game map is bigger than the last. Same goes with Just Cause and most other open world series. But the problem becomes, is all of the content different enough to be worth the player's engagement? When I first got my hands on Just Cause 3 on my Xbox, the first 8 hours was some of the most action-y Michael Bay fun I've had in a long time. After that though, I started to see how shallow the game world really was. It was just copy and paste to an absurd degree. I have friends who love the game, but whenever they play it, I just get in my phone and cry on the inside because I've seen all that there is to see from a game 10 times bigger than Skyrim in only 8 hours. So the problem sometimes becomes quality over quantity. And side rant, have you ever heard someone recommend you a game and just tell you it's a slow burn? Oh! Okay, I have never enjoyed a game like that. I just can't do it. Now maybe, just maybe, it's not good when you have to put 10 hours into a game for it to actually be considered enjoyable by its biggest fans. Okay, imagine starting a TV show and being told you have to watch the first 2 seasons for it to get good. So my point is, there's often much less fluff in indie games. What could be considered a gimmick in a large game can easily carry a small one. It's easier to tell a much more impactful story in 5 hours than 50. Why? Well, you as the player remember everything better, and movies aren't more than a few hours long. Most books aren't either. No fluff, just good, memorable content that respects your time. How does someone accumulate hundreds of millions of dollars to create something? Well, you have rich people give them money in hopes that there is a return on investment. Those that poured the majority of money into a project have a larger influence over it. They have an impact over when the game releases, sometimes pushing games out too early in order to get their money back. Other times, they cause developers to add ways to make money from the game, whether it be overpriced DLC or microtransactions, just to help guarantee a profit. Studios sometimes have to play it safe, reusing similar formulas for games because they are proven to sell well, holding back a lot of creativity the team may have. Small teams with small budgets don't have to deal with that amount of pressure. Jason Roberts, the creator of Gorgoa, created much of the game through his own money, with the help of loved ones and the Indie Fund, until he was picked up by publisher Annapurna Interactive. Did I say that right? Annapurna? I don't know. Many games are funded like this. They start off self-funded in order to create a working prototype, which is then floated around in hopes of receiving extra funding through established publishers, crowdfunding, or programs like Idea Xbox or Epic Games Mega Grant. And when things like this happen, indie teams still have full creative control to make whatever they want to make. A lot of AAA games outside of Nintendo's IPs kinda look the same, especially Sony's being third-person over-the-shoulder action games. Uncharted, The Last of Us, Spider-Man are all incredible games, but each game in their respective series plays fairly similar to the last, which isn't a bad thing, but when one studio works on a single series for over a decade, sometimes you just want to see what else they can do. In this regard, indies are games that provide variety in a repetitive industry. There's less money at stake, which means less pressure to sell millions of copies, which means more freedom to make games with smaller niches. So, I'm a big art style guy. I'm not a huge fan of your typical 2D pixel platformer game. When games are shorter, I look more for games that are focused on story rather than innovative gameplay. So games like Celeste or Into the Gungeon or Into the Breach don't appeal to me. I want games that visually appeal to me. Games like TUNIC, which has this cute little Zelda aesthetic to it. The Last Night, which has this just incredible presentation to it. It blew my mind when it was first revealed. Then there's Kena Bridge of Spirits, the game by Ember Labs, who made that insane Majora's Mask animation a while ago. Sable has a really unique art style. Then there's whatever Playdead's next game is. I do not care what it is, just give it to me now. I will pay at least $2 for it right now. Recently, I found myself a fan of the DS style of games. I already mentioned A Short Hike, but I got Twitter recently and I found some other games that are like what I'm talking about. Like Lil Gator Game and Fermata on the Pithos. I'm probably not saying that right. Games like these are typically only made by a handful of people at the most. They have small followings but are still able to go through with publishing their games. They don't have the newest motion capture technology, but what they do have is pretty much whatever else they want in the realms of gameplay and narrative. Indie games obviously have a big impact on the gaming industry as a whole. They make up most of the games that exist, especially if we include console, PC, and mobile games. I could go on and on about how indie games have created their own genres and can have a much larger cultural impact than some AAA games. But now, I just want to talk about what they mean to me.
Hi, my name is Mike Munoz, and it is April 18, 2013.
See this little guy right here? That's me, at age 11. I played video games back then. I kind of just played with Legos a lot. I played my Wii sometimes, maybe Zelda or Mario Kart, but in a few years I would get an Xbox and play Assassin's Creed and Halo, and that is it. I later branched out and got myself a Switch in 2017 and got a PS4 in 2019. But it wasn't really until I recently got a PS5 that I started to play indie games. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's mostly because any AAA game I've wanted to play from the last generation, I already have, save for a few I'm waiting for a price drop on. I mean, I've played a few here and there over the years, like Limbo and Oxenfree, Superhot, Gunman Clive. I loved all of them, but I still prefer dumping hundreds of hours into Halo 5.
Save us all. But now I must save us.
But a few months ago, I played Kentucky Route Zero, and then Inside, 3/4 Home, Takashi and Hiroshi, Thomas Was Alone, Anthem. These games are the games that will stick with me, longer than Uncharted 2 and Final Fantasy 15. They may not be brought up in discussions of the greatest games in any respect in 10 years. They don't all want to be. They don't need to sell copies. They don't need attention to exist. They only exist because someone wanted it to, not needed. 3/4 Home. It's an odd one. Definitely not for everyone because it's not really a game. It's just like an hour-long phone call. That's it. That's all it is. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. It's only $5 or so, and if you're into heavy narrative games like Telltale or visual novels, get it. Me, it really made me think about the small choices I make in conversation with my family. My tone of voice, word choice, patience. That's not really something you see covered in, say, Bethesda games. Okay, this may sound a bit on the nose, but the people behind indie games are allowed to be more human, allowed to be more honest in their message, more open in their motivations. And that's not to say that big games can't have innovative gameplay or impactful story beats. But there's this unrivaled humanity in a game made by 6 people about the loss of the game director's child to cancer.
What happens when the dragon scorches the earth? How do we find each other in the smoke?
Games like these aren't just games. They are art. Human-to-human communication through this interactive, extraordinarily special medium that is video games. They don't just impact the economy, they impact people. They impact me. Recently, Sony has been making shifts away from smaller, more experimental games. It's partially why I made this video. They want those big, impressive system sellers. That makes sense, and I'm here for it, honestly. But they're shutting down smaller studios and forcing others to do things they don't want to do is a little concerning. They're remaking The Last of Us again, on a system that can already play the original remaster. And I love that game, both of them for the record, and the first one is one of my favorite games of all time. But what? Why? What? And it's not like they're entirely ignoring indie games. They have some great looking exclusive ones coming out later this year. And if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited for them. Xbox has been great about supporting smaller teams in their programs, same with Epic Games. There's a lot to look forward to. It's not like they're dying or anything. No, they're not even a little bit. Some people just don't see the value of experimentation and creative freedom. Others just look at a game and if it doesn't look nice and shiny, they think it's low quality. I just needed a reminder that great things can come from anyone, not just Nintendo or Naughty Dog. I have a lot of catching up to do. There are so many great indie games I already have in my backlog that I just need to actually play. And there's a lot more coming. This is the future of gaming. This is indie gaming. To close out this video, I'm going to play a full clip of Ryan Green's speech at the 2016 Game Awards, where he won the Games for Impact award with That Dragon Cancer. Why? Because games like this are why we celebrate games, because moments like these are rare. Thanks for watching.
That dragon cancer exists because my wife Amy, my children, Caleb, Isaac, Elijah, and Zoe, my business partner Josh, our team, John, Brock, Ryan, Mike, and Chris, our friends who are at Ouya, Kelly, Julie, Bob, and Jared, our over 3,000 Kickstarter backers, Indie Fund, and this entire industry believed it should exist. Often in video games, we get to choose how we're seen. Our avatars and our tweets and the work that we do are all meant to portray the story that we want to tell the world about why our lives matter. But sometimes the story is written onto us, or it's told because of us or in spite of us, and it reveals our weaknesses, our failures, our hopes, and our fears. You let us tell the story of my son Joel. And in the end, it was not the story that we wanted to tell. But you chose to love us through our grief by being willing to stop and to listen and to not turn away. To let my son Joel's life change you because you chose to see him and to experience how we loved him. And I have hope that when we are all willing to see each other, not for just who we want to be, but who we are and who we're meant to be, this act of love and this act of grace can change the world.